Hey guys, this is the Practical Christianity Podcast, sharing a little wisdom for the whole of life. My name is Dale Tedder, and I appreciate you joining me today. I had a Walking Points podcast for so long that I think I called it that in the last episode, but it is Practical Christianity. And if you go to my Substack, which is daletedder.substack.com, it will you can go to the About page, and it'll just let you know a little bit about practical Christianity, why I call it that, what the purpose of it is, some foundational things, and then I have ongoing columns that are sort of expositing or explicating what practical Christianity is and why I think it's so important, and why I changed my banner, so to speak, from Walking Points to Practical Christianity. Or you don't have to do that, of course, and whatever you decide. But I thought if you're ever curious, you can go there and check that out. Today, I want to start what is really the first half of the first part of a series introducing practical Christianity and why I'm doing this, why I think it's important. This sort of comes after 34 years of pastoral ministry, learning, studying, growing, conversations that I've had with people, men in particular. And I do want to say, while this is not exclusively for men, I'm talking to men. And I think there's a lot that can be gained from men and women, but I feel like there's a need to continue to reach out and try to minister to men in our culture today. And so that's always been a part of my pastoral ministry at my church. So anyway, you can be the judge of that. I'll let you know, my mom thinks that there's a lot to get out of it for women as well. And if my mom thinks that, then it can't possibly be wrong. Anyway, and speaking of wrong, that's what this particular episode is going to be focusing on. Something is wrong. And it's not going to be all dire, but this first one may be a little bit of a downer, Debbie Downer. However, hopefully I'll be offering a lot of hope and solutions and ideas, and we'll see what comes of it. But anyway, so thanks for being here today. I want to begin by talking to you about sort of a feeling, if you listen to a lot of podcasts or read a lot of articles, and you get a feel of kind of the state of the culture, and it's easy to go down some really dark rabbit trails when you do that sort of thing. So you have to be careful when you do that. But in your own life, you may have the feeling, even though maybe you just can't quite name it, you're not quite sure where it started. And maybe it didn't just start suddenly. Maybe it kind of crept in slowly, somewhere between paying your mortgage, which I've recently done, quarterly reviews at work, your kids' schedules and school and ball games and things like that, or different things you have going on in your life, the thousands of obligations that really make up what our world often refers to as a successful life, and you're just trying to keep up. But on the other hand, maybe it really did hit you all at one time. Maybe it was just one ordinary Tuesday or Wednesday during the week. You looked in the mirror and you thought, is this all there is? That's hardly an original question or observation. People have been asking that meaning question, that purpose question for a long time. And men, I know as a man, we eventually get to that place where we ask meaning sorts of questions. Why am I here? Is this all there is? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? So maybe you've been there yourself, and you have this list. Now, maybe you don't have it written down anywhere, but you have this mental list perhaps of, here is what by my age I should be desiring, should be doing, should have already accomplished. And maybe you're checking them off. Maybe it's like a task list and you're just checking them off one by one. Or conversely, maybe you've just given up. Maybe you've just said, you know what? I can't keep up with this. I'm not even sure I like this list of standards to begin with, and why should I pursue them? And you've given up, but you're not quite sure how to readjust your thinking on it. And so, you're kind of in a rock and a hard place because this isn't what I want, but I'm not sure what I want is. And so you're trying to figure that out. But whatever it is, something feels a little bit off. There's a gap. And this is an important thing. We're going to come back to it at the end with a question for us to think about. There's a gap between the life that you're living right now, kind of where you are, how you're living your life, and that inner sense of what you believe you were made for, or you feel like you were made for. Just there's a gap between what is and what ought to be, where you are, where you want to be, or sense that you need to be. And you can't quite close that gap. You can't bring them together. And that's a really important thing to be able to do, is not to have these two compartmentalized lives. And I think it's really important for us to close that gap and to make the is and the ought sort of on the same page. And so maybe that causes a lot of frustration for you. No matter how hard you work, no matter how much you earn, no matter how many boxes you check off, you just can't close that gap. And I want to say something right at the start before we go any further, and that is what you're experiencing and what you're feeling is not just you. It's not your imagination. You're not weak for feeling it. I know sometimes, I've talked to a lot of men in my ministry, and they, sometimes we buy into the different perceptions of what manhood is that aren't biblically defined. They just sort of whatever's current at the time. And so guys will feel like, well, maybe I'm weak for feeling this. Maybe I just need to man up and keep persevering and doing my thing. And so if that's what you're feeling, that doesn't quite seem right to you, I just want to tell you, you're not alone. And there are a lot of guys that are feeling that as well. Something really is wrong, to be sure. And the fact that you feel it, really, maybe the most important thing about you right now is that you have a sense of that. So here's what I want you to understand, and for both of us, all of us to understand, whoever's watching this right now, that this is not just your private experience. Now, to be sure, it is a personal experience that you're having, but it's not just private in the sense that you're the only one going through it. If you kind of follow the culture around, you'll see that the best and the brightest observers that we have to offer. Well, I'm not sure they're the best and the brightest we have to offer, but they're the best and the brightest that are making a splash talking about this sort of thing. The ones that have their own podcasts and YouTube channels and are writing books. They're the ones, that are talking about it a lot. They've been tracking this for a number of years, and they're not really painting a very encouraging picture. What we are learning when you read the different books and articles and listen to different podcasts is something you probably are already aware of, is that men are disengaging. And what are they disengaging from? They're disengaging from education, from the workplace, from marriage, from community, and since I'm a pastor, I certainly want to include this, from faith. Although I do want to say there are some encouraging signs about that last part with faith, and perhaps as more young men, start re-engaging with faith, maybe some of those other things will come back. But that is to put the cart before the horse right now. We'll eventually get there. But the statistics on male isolation have been established for decades now. I don't know if it was a book or an article that was written a number of years ago, said, the great lonely American male epidemic. That may not be quite the exact title of it, but it was something like that men feel very isolated. And we have, male isolation. And very often that brings with it an assortment of other things like addiction, mental health struggles, and a sense overall of purposelessness that have become so familiar that we're not really surprised by them very much anymore. Boys are falling behind in school at rates that I don't know that we could even have imagined a generation ago, and certainly not 2 generations ago. Young men are retreating into screens, into fantasy, into sort of to quote a certain song, they're becoming comfortably numb, um, living lives where nothing is asked of them, and therefore they're giving nothing back. And so very often they're being challenged by people to raise their standard and to do hard things. And there's something to that, that young men want to be challenged, and they want to engage, but they just don't have a sense of direction and where they're supposed to go. And then, older men, middle-aged men, guys that are getting old like me, we're beginning to die of what researchers have called deaths of despair. That's encouraging. Deaths of despair because of all this sense of loneliness and meaninglessness and purposelessness and all those sorts of things. And then even older men than I are beginning to finish their lives quietly wondering, did anything I do mattered? Did any of my life matter? Did I leave a mark? Was anything of significance? And so a lot of men struggle with that, especially as they get older. And these are some of the things, by the way, that we'll be talking about in future episodes. Also, a deeper dive into all of this also appears on my Substack. So sorry to be promoting that so much, but I'm just sort of giving a cursory outline of the deeper things that I've written on. So you can check that out if you find that of interest. And there are a lot of other folks out there I would happily recommend and probably will who are doing some really important work on this. But what I want to get back to is that the cultural conversation about men has gotten really loud. And I think it's gotten deeply confused because what a lot of young men, older men than that, middle-aged men, older men, men are being told, hey, you are the problem. Your masculinity, things you thought were just normal to being a man, well, that's toxic and it's not doing us any good. So you're the problem. And so the solution is something far less than who we are and who we were created to be. And so that's one side. Then you have the other side responding to that, maybe not responding, but reacting to that, and not always in constructive, productive ways. Other voices are pushing back, telling men, hey, you need to reclaim your dominance and embrace your aggression. Stop apologizing for being male. Now, each of those is not completely wrong to a point, but they don't really go into the whole truth of what that might look like. They sort of just kind of capture the emotion of what men are experiencing and feeling, but they're not really giving more helpful suggestions. And as a Christian, I would want to say biblical, God-honoring, Christ-centered directions for life, for how we might live with the wisdom that is offered through Christ and the Christian faith. So most men know that, this side is, being called toxic masculine man. That's not very helpful. Kind of this unbridled aggression on the other hand, that's not very helpful. So I think most men sense that it's somewhere in between, even if they can't name exactly what that is. Going back a number of years, and maybe you've read this book, there was a survivor of a Nazi concentration camp named Viktor Frankl. He was a Jewish psychiatrist who experienced, the horrors of that situation, and he survived. And he got out, and he spent the rest of his life studying the human need for meaning, which is going to be a really important theme that's going to be running through a lot of what we're going to be talking about. And he said something that I don't think, is any less true today than when he wrote it. In fact, maybe it's gaining in its force. And to paraphrase him, he said, the deepest hunger that a human carries is not for pleasure, which is what we often appeal to. It's not for power, which is one side of the argument's continual suggestion, and it's not even for comfort, but it's for meaning, significance, meaning, purpose, things that are related to that. For the deepest hunger that a human being carries is not found in the pleasure and the power and the comfort, but again, It is for meaning, and that's what we long for. Ultimately, I'm going to suggest that we actually are longing for the God who gives us meaning, who created us and designed us for meaning and for a relationship with him and for others, and all the meaning that's tied up with that. It's for a sense, especially for you older guys, that your life really did amount to something, that it added up to something, that you were moving in a good direction, you were contributing to things that had eternal significance. Kind of like a famous quotation from a gladiator movie, what we do in life echoes in eternity. There's a deep desire for that we have, men and women, I would imagine, not just men, and that our lives mattered. They mattered to someone, they mattered somewhere, and that the life we lived was worth traveling at the end of it. And I want to suggest also that the hunger is not going away. It's not just a quick fix sort of thing, do these 3 easy steps or even these 3 hard steps, and all of a sudden you'll have meaning. That hunger is going to continue, and it's going to be, as it's often been characterized, as a long obedience in the same direction. That's the life of faithful Christian discipleship, by the way, a long obedience in the same direction. Of course, it's fueled by grace. It's fueled by the Holy Spirit. It's directed by Scripture and the Holy Spirit illuminating hearts and minds to move in that direction. But to be sure, it is a long obedience moving in that same faithful direction. And I think the fact that there are so many men who are struggling to know that and to name that, let alone satisfy that, that's one of the defining crises of our day, I think. And the culture has not been silent about that. I've already said this, there's no shortage of people who are throwing their 2 cents in. And a lot of them are adding a lot of value that we really ought to listen to. They've noticed what's going on and they're offering solutions. And I believe some, maybe even much of what they're saying is genuinely helpful and worth listening to. The voices, for example, telling men, hey, you need to take on some responsibility. That the meaning you're looking for comes through, bearing responsibility and bearing the weight of doing hard things. They also say things like, hey, the isolation that you're living in is not healthy for you. It could really be a problem in your life. You need brotherhood. You need fellowship. That is essential. And so I think these voices that are saying this are saying something really important and something real and something worth listening to. And what I want to say is the diagnosis that many of these voices are sharing, I think in many cases is spot on. It's accurate. But here's where the difference is very often, not always, but very often, is that the prescription is what falls short. The diagnosis of what's going on, the observations they're making and noticing, it's right on target, but the prescription for what they're prescribing of how to respond to it, not so much. And here's why, and I think this is important. When you're trying to understand what a man is, without reference to what we actually are, who we've been made to be by our Creator, when you're trying to locate meaning without a source of meaning, without objective meaning that's been given to us by the way we were designed by a creator, a personal creator who had a vested interest in creating us and cares for us, loves us, has our best interest at heart, wants us to be like him. In fact, we were created in his image. It's like trying to fill a hole without knowing its true dimensions. When you're trying to come up with prescriptions that don't take any of those things into account, it's seeking to fill this hole that just won't be filled by the things of this world. And it really underestimates the problem. And therefore, it's going to be continually underdosed. The cure is going to be continually underdosed. It'll never quite solve the problem because it doesn't really know the scope of what's going on and what could be. Perhaps some of you have heard of the philosopher Blaise Pascal. He wrote in the 17th century. And while he didn't use the phrase, he certainly described the idea of having a God-shaped vacuum in every human heart. In other words, we were created for a purpose, for a reason, by God, and only God can fill that vacuum, that hole that's in the human heart, that search for meaning. Otherwise, an emptiness that nothing in this world will fill will be what we pursue. And we'll never quite feel satisfied because we're trying to put the wrong things into our lives to provide that meaning. Men, there's a whole host of things that men will use to or pursue in an attempt to fill that meaning void. They'll try to look for achievement, with pleasure, with distraction, with status, with adventure, and maybe even relationships. And again, these aren't necessarily in and of themselves bad things, but they can become diversions to the real thing, to the true thing, to the lasting thing that can meet the needs that we have. And so Pascal wasn't condemning the issue so much as diagnosing it. He's saying, here's the problem. We keep ourselves busy, he observed, precisely because we can't stand to sit quietly with the hunger that we feel, but we can't name. And I think that's why we're continually looking for distractions. And I mean, in the world we live in now, being distracted is a pretty easy thing to do. It's easy to be distracted. I just read an article yesterday that talked about phone-free restaurants are really taking off right now because some people are understanding my phone is a distraction. I can just scroll, doom scroll through all these different things over and over and over again, looking for kind of a dopamine hit or something, but it's not fulfilling and it'll let you down every time. It's not going to fill that God-shaped vacuum in your heart. So the secular world can see the hunger. It just can't tell you what it's for. And so that's what we're going to be looking at, not only in the next episode, but also in the episodes to come. So before I let you go, I just want to leave a couple questions of reflection for you to think about, to meditate upon, chew on a little bit, and see where your mind takes you. You don't have to answer it immediately. Just think about it for a little bit. But here's the question. When you're honest with yourself, what is the gap in your life that you feel most clearly between the life you're living right now and the life you sense you were made for? It's back to what I was saying at the very beginning. Here's where you are now. Here's your life. Here's where you feel you want to be. I'm not even talking about where you ought to be right now, but that deeper hunger or sense that I'm not here. And this is where I sense I need to be. I want to be, but I don't know how to get there. Where in your life do you feel that most keenly? Where does it seem more emphasized in your life? That's something for you to think about. Where does it show up? Does it show up in your work, in your relationships, in those quiet moments when there's no one else with you and you just have time to sit with yourself and think about life? Is that when it shows up? And again, you don't have to have the answer. I want to try to help you navigate that, and I'll share some things I've learned from successes and failures in my own life, as well as what I believe the Scripture has to say, the Bible, the Christian tradition, the wisest, the brightest and wisest that the Christian faith has had to offer. I've had some really helpful counsel and wisdom over the years that I think will add a lot of value to your life. It has stood the test of time. And that's one of the greatest ways and most important ways we can discern the value of something and the truth of something. Because I want to suggest it's not just valuable, but it's valuable because it's true. It's true because it comes from God. And if you check out the Practical Christianity website, there's a whole page about that. And I won't say more now. I'll leave you hanging, and you can go and look it up for yourself. But again, just be honest about the question. You don't have to have the answer. But that's where everything starts. Everything starts with honesty. And so I would want to just tell you, if something has stirred within you and got you thinking about some things, do me a favor. Check out my Substack. Again, it's Dale Tedder, DaleTedder.substack.com. And I go into deeper dives there. There's a lot of material, and maybe there'll be some things that'll help you there as well. A lot of resources, videos, things like that. But regardless of whether you do that or not, I appreciate you spending some time with me now. And I look forward to, traveling this with you. I know it's something I think about a lot. There's a lot of great resources. I hope to suggest some of those. Great books, great podcasts, a lot of courses you can take online as well if you want to do that deep of a dive, or just check out the website. And I'll be sharing these things periodically on my website, on YouTube, some other places. And let's interact and grow together. Let me know some things that have worked for you, things that haven't worked. And I look forward to moving forward with you on this journey. So I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to being with you next time.